This superhero story begins by introducing Edward, a man sitting at home watching TV. The news on TV discusses the rising tensions and conflict between the US and Russia, creating an atmosphere of impending war. Edward enjoys expressing his opinions on political issues, having been a politician himself in the past. Suddenly, a masked man enters Edward's home. This masked intruder is terrifying and attacks Edward brutally. Edward fights back, refusing to give in easily, and manages to land a few blows. However, Edward is quite old and cannot match the strength of his attacker. Eventually, the masked man pushes Edward out of a window, sending him plummeting to his death. His lifeless body lies on the ground, blood-soaked, alongside a smiley badge now stained with blood. Who was this masked man, and why did he kill Edward? Behind this incident lies a deep and significant truth. We learn that Edward was once part of a superhero team called Minutemen. This team roamed the city, protecting people and ensuring safety. In fact, the United States had even won World War II with the help of these superheroes. They accomplished feats that the government found nearly impossible. However, over time, as the superheroes aged, many left the team to live normal lives. The government, too, turned against them. Although superheroes helped humanity, their powers often caused significant financial damage. Large buildings and countless homes were destroyed during their missions. Because of this, the government decided to permanently ban all superheroes. Any superheroes found using their powers were arrested, and many were even killed. The story then shifts to the present time, where we see an astronaut conducting research on the moon. Suddenly, through the astronaut's helmet, a strange blue figure approaches in an eerie manner. It is revealed that this figure is another superhero who has returned to Earth to form a new team. This new generation of superheroes is named the Watchmen. The large blue man is named Dr. Jonathan, who possesses extraordinary creative powers. With his abilities, he can manipulate and destroy anything by merely using his will. In the team, Dr. Jonathan is the most powerful member. Alongside him are other members, including Adrian, Daniel, and Walter, a man who always wears a mask over his face. At this point in the story, a politician named Nixon has won the election for the third consecutive term, granting him complete control over the government. He can do whatever he pleases. The focus shifts to Walter, who is seen sneaking into someone's house. He starts searching the place and comes across Edward's belongings. Edward, who was a member of the Minutemen and was killed at the start of the story, had his entire superhero costume and weapons stored there. Walter is trying to uncover secrets about Edward. He discovers Edward's hidden weapons and saves the location for future use. During his search, a man tries to stop Walter, but Walter brutally kills him and leaves. Normally, Walter avoids killing innocent people, but this time he does, implying there may be a deeper reason behind his actions. Next, we see Daniel, another member of the Watchmen superhero team. Daniel is shown talking to an older man about how advanced countries might use nuclear bombs to annihilate their enemies. Daniel gathers information from this conversation. Just as they finish, news about Walter appears on TV. Walter is accused of multiple murders, which shocks Daniel. Troubled by the revelation, Daniel heads home, only to find that the door to his house is broken. Daniel cautiously enters his home and finds Walter sitting inside. Walter tells Daniel that he needs to talk about something important. He leads Daniel to the basement and hands him Edward's smiley badge, now stained with blood, as a grim reminder of Edward's brutal death. Walter tells Daniel that there seems to be an organization systematically targeting and killing superheroes. He is determined to uncover who is behind it. However, Daniel dismisses the idea, arguing that the era of superheroes is over. Most of the team members have retired and are now living normal lives among humans. Daniel advises Walter to let it go and focus on living a peaceful life, as getting involved will only lead to more chaos. Walter, unconvinced, leaves after warning Daniel that ignoring the situation could lead to a new nuclear war. He predicts that if superheroes remain divided, it will be impossible to prevent the catastrophic loss of countless lives. Despite Daniel's advice, Walter declares he will not back down. Meanwhile, the story shifts focus to Adrian, who is giving an interview on a news channel. Adrian explains that he is working on a groundbreaking nuclear power project that will eliminate electricity and energy shortages forever. His discovery aims to resolve the resource crisis caused by overpopulation and reduce global conflicts between nations. Adrian believes his invention will usher in an era of peace and progress. Adrian is deeply engrossed in completing his project when Daniel visits him. Daniel shares his concerns, revealing that someone is targeting the Watchmen and has likely already killed Edward, one of their original members. Despite Daniel's warnings, Adrian remains indifferent. He dismisses the notion as absurd and continues to focus on his work, seemingly unbothered by the potential danger. Adrian dismisses Daniel's concerns and asks him to leave. Feeling powerless, Daniel has no choice but to walk away. Meanwhile, Walter heads to a secret government facility. Upon reaching the basement, he finds Dr. Jonathan and Lauren, both members of the Watchmen group. Dr. Jonathan, composed of cosmic radiation, appears incredibly powerful. Walter explains the threat to them, warning that someone is systematically targeting superheroes and that they must uncover the truth at all costs. Walter specifically asks Dr. Jonathan for help, as he has the ability to see future visions. Dr. Jonathan attempts to focus but is unable to access his future vision abilities due to harmful radiation interfering with his technique. Additionally, Dr. Jonathan's behavior has become noticeably distant and robotic, making him less cooperative with the team. Frustrated, Dr. Jonathan uses his powers to teleport Walter out of the facility, leaving Walter disheartened as his attempt to seek help is misunderstood. Lauren, who has spent significant time with Dr. Jonathan, also notices his concerning behavioral changes. Sensing something is wrong, Dr. Jonathan invades Lauren's thoughts, discovering that she has plans to meet Daniel for dinner and that they may have feelings for each other. Dr. Jonathan dismisses Lauren, telling her to focus on her personal life rather than interfering with his work. Disturbed by Dr. Jonathan's erratic behavior, Lauren decides to leave the facility and head straight to meet Daniel at a restaurant, where he has been waiting for her. During their conversation, Lauren opens up about her growing concerns regarding Dr. Jonathan. She tells Daniel that his mental state seems to be deteriorating and that he's behaving more like a robot than a human. She warns that if Dr. Jonathan's mind spirals out of control, anyone in his path could be obliterated. Daniel takes her concerns seriously and begins thinking about a solution to the increasingly dangerous situation. After finishing their conversation and stepping out of the restaurant, Daniel notices two government agents seemingly following Lauren. Realizing there's something suspicious going on, he advises Lauren to stay alert. Meanwhile, Edward's funeral is shown. A large crowd of soldiers and officials gather to honor him. Many mourn his tragic death, remembering him as a great soldier who played a pivotal role in winning battles as part of the Minutemen. The scene then shifts to Dr. Jonathan teleporting Lauren to her mother Sally's house. Disoriented by the sudden teleportation, Lauren feels nauseous and begins vomiting. After recovering, she confronts her mother, who is drinking early in the morning. Lauren expresses her frustration, but Sally seems unaffected. It is revealed that Sally was once a superhero herself and a member of the Minutemen. The narrative flashes back to a moment from years ago when Sally was part of the team. After completing a major mission, Sally retires to her room to rest. Edward, who was also part of the team, enters her room uninvited and tries to assault her. However, another teammate named Justice intervenes and beats Edward severely for his actions. Although Edward deserved his punishment, Sally feels a deep sense of guilt whenever she remembers that moment, as she believes her actions indirectly led to Edward's suffering. The story returns to Edward's funeral, where Dr. Jonathan and Daniel are also present. Dr. Jonathan reflects on his past and recalls a moment when he lost control of his powers during a conflict between the US and Russia. His actions caused widespread destruction, and in the chaos, he unintentionally killed several members of his own team. Ever since, Dr. Jonathan has been trying desperately to control his overwhelming powers and maintain his composure. The weight of his memories and the growing tension among the remaining heroes suggest that an even larger crisis is looming. One day, a member of the Watchmen team is seen in a bar when a woman approaches him. This woman, who was in a relationship with the member, reveals that she is pregnant. She confronts him, demanding acknowledgement and support. However, the man, who turns out to be a younger Edward, speaks to her rudely and dismissively. Dr. Jonathan is also present, silently observing the scene. The woman, enraged by Edward's attitude, grabs a shard of glass and throws it at him, injuring him slightly. Furious, Edward pulls out a gun and shoots her without hesitation, killing her instantly. Dr. Jonathan tries to stop Edward, but he fails to intervene in time. Later, he confronts Edward, asking why he committed such a heinous act. Edward, however, shifts the blame, telling Dr. Jonathan that with his powers, he could have stopped the bullet easily but chose not to. This leaves Dr. Jonathan questioning himself, wondering if he is losing his humanity and self-control. He fears that his deteriorating mental state could soon pose a threat not just to his team but to all of humanity. At Edward's funeral, Adrian is also present, reminiscing about an incident involving Edward. Years ago, Adrian had devised a well-thought-out plan to use his resources and intellect for the betterment of humanity. He had a foolproof strategy to end wars between major nations and ensure global peace. However, Edward, refusing to support the plan, not only dismissed it but destroyed the entire project by setting it on fire. Because of Edward's actions, Adrian's vision for peace never materialized, and global conflicts persisted. Daniel, too, recalls an incident from the past. During a protest, a group of demonstrators confronted the superheroes. The situation required careful handling and restraint from the team. Daniel remembers how they managed to diffuse the tension without escalating the conflict, which highlighted the delicate balance the team had to maintain between their powers and their responsibility to humanity. These memories from different team members reveal the deep flaws, conflicts, and unresolved issues within the Watchmen, further emphasizing the growing cracks in their unity and the dangers ahead. Edward, driven by adrenaline, overreacts during a protest and violently attacks the crowd. While the use of tear gas was acceptable, his actions result in the loss of many lives. Daniel becomes furious with Edward's behavior and confronts him, demanding an explanation. However, Edward, heavily intoxicated, is in no state to respond rationally. After the funeral rituals are completed, everyone leaves, except for a mysterious man named Mehmet. He quietly approaches Edward's grave and places flowers before leaving unnoticed, except by Walter, who catches a glimpse of him. Walter follows Mehmet and confronts him, asking how he knew Edward. The elderly Mehmet, visibly nervous, reveals that Edward had visited him some time ago. Edward had come to apologize for the terrible things he had done, including an incident involving Mehmet's daughter. Through his tears, Edward had expressed deep remorse. Mehmet realized in that moment that, despite his mistakes, Edward still had humanity within him and could have been a good man. Meanwhile, the scene shifts to Dr. Jonathan and Lauren. Lauren is visibly upset with Dr. Jonathan for not giving her enough time or attention. Frustrated, she throws an object at him in anger. However, the object passes straight through Dr. Jonathan's body, hitting and destroying a nearby TV instead. His cosmic powers make his physical form intangible, leaving Lauren both shocked and furious. To calm her down, Dr. Jonathan uses his powers to repair the broken TV instantly. Despite this gesture, Lauren remains angry and storms out. She goes to Daniel, telling him she can no longer be with Dr. Jonathan and needs his support. In an effort to clear her mind, Lauren decides to take a walk with Daniel. She shares her growing concerns about Dr. Jonathan, explaining how dangerous he could become in the future. Lauren warns Daniel that if Dr. Jonathan loses complete control of his powers, the consequences could be catastrophic for everyone. Dr. Jonathan is shown preparing for an interview. Using his extraordinary powers, he puts on his suit effortlessly and teleports directly to the office where the interview will take place. The room is filled with media officials, all eager to ask him questions. As the interview begins, some reporters start raising serious accusations against Dr. Jonathan. They claim that the radiation emanating from his body is causing cancer in people. One of the reporters, Jenny, who was previously in a relationship with Dr. Jonathan, reveals that she has been diagnosed with cancer, allegedly because of him. Several other reporters join in, asserting that Dr. Jonathan poses a grave threat to humanity and demanding an explanation. Overwhelmed by the barrage of random and hostile questions, Dr. Jonathan becomes visibly frustrated. The reporters' relentless accusations push him over the edge. In a moment of anger, he uses his powers to teleport all the reporters to another galaxy, wiping them out entirely. Their lives are instantly extinguished, showcasing the terrifying consequences of provoking someone with such immense power. Meanwhile, Lauren and Daniel are walking and talking when Daniel heads to meet another associate. There, he sees the breaking news on TV about Dr. Jonathan's actions, how he teleported and killed many people in a fit of rage before disappearing. The incident leaves Daniel deeply unsettled. Lauren's earlier warnings about Dr. Jonathan come to mind, as she had described how his mental state was becoming increasingly robotic and detached. Daniel begins to fear that Dr. Jonathan might become a threat to humanity in the future. His immense powers make him nearly invincible, and no one on Earth would be capable of stopping him if he decided to turn against humanity. The scene shifts to Mars, where Dr. Jonathan has teleported himself. Alone on the Red Planet, his actions and intentions remain a mystery, but his detachment from humanity grows ever stronger. The looming question is, what will Dr. Jonathan do next? Now on Mars, Dr. Jonathan reflects on his past, particularly his time with his ex-girlfriend, Jenny. The memory takes him back to the days when he was an ordinary human being. At the time, Jenny and Jonathan were in a serious relationship and planning to get married. Jonathan was a high-ranking employee at an atomic research company, deeply involved in groundbreaking scientific experiments. However, tragedy struck one fateful day when an accident occurred. During a research session, Jonathan became trapped inside an atomic chamber. Before anyone could rescue him, a massive surge of hydrogen atoms bombarded his body, completely obliterating it. By the time help arrived, there wasn't a single part of his body left intact. But then, something extraordinary happened. Jonathan's body began to reassemble itself, atom by atom. He was no longer the man he used to be. He transformed into the glowing blue figure now known as Dr. Jonathan. His body was rebuilt entirely from hydrogen atoms, granting him limitless energy and abilities that defied imagination. Everyone present in the research laboratory was left in shock, unable to comprehend the transformation they had just witnessed. Jonathan, too, struggled to recognize himself. He had become something far beyond human, a being of immense power. At first, Jonathan had no idea of the extent of his powers. But as time passed, he realized he could accomplish feats that no ordinary human could. He decided to embrace his new identity and, inspired by superheroes like Superman, wanted to be recognized as a symbol of hope and power. To mark his transformation, he inscribed the symbol of a hydrogen atom on his forehead, representing the atomic structure that now defined him. News soon spread about this Superman figure with unparalleled energy and abilities. The public was in awe of Dr. Jonathan, and his reputation grew rapidly. During this time, the United States was embroiled in the Vietnam War. Desperate for a decisive advantage, the president turned to Dr. Jonathan for help. Dr. Jonathan agreed to assist and was sent to the battlefield. Conflicts that would have taken months to resolve were concluded in mere moments, thanks to his extraordinary powers. His involvement solidified his image as a near-divine being, but the immense power he wielded also began to alienate him from the very humanity he once cherished. This marked the beginning of his journey into isolation and inner conflict. With Dr. Jonathan's extraordinary powers, he single-handedly ended major global conflicts in a single day, defeating all the warring nations. After bringing an end to the wars, Dr. Jonathan meets Lauren, a woman he grows very fond of. The two become quite close, but soon enough, Jenny, Dr. Jonathan's ex-girlfriend, finds out about their relationship. Upset, Jenny confronts Dr. Jonathan, telling him she can no longer be with him. She accuses him of being a cheater, reminding him that he is no longer human, and she cannot be with someone who plays with emotions like he does. As these events play out, Dr. Jonathan, now on Mars, reflects on the situation. He begins to imagine that he will never return to Earth, as his visions have become increasingly strange and detached from humanity. He starts building strange structures on Mars with the aim of creating a new civilization. His vision of humanity goes beyond the current understanding of humans, which would eventually be realized in time. Back on Earth, government officials approach Lauren, blaming her for Dr. Jonathan's departure. They claim that his disappearance is her fault, but Lauren denies any responsibility and threatens them, telling them not to involve her in this matter. Meanwhile, Dr. Jonathan's powers continue to grow, and it is becoming clear that his potential could lead to a disastrous outcome for humanity. Just as things seem dire, two scientists arrive with news. They have discovered Dr. Jonathan's location on Mars, where he is constructing a new civilization. With this knowledge, the government officials are now hopeful they can make contact with him. However, Lauren has a deep, unsettling feeling that this may only signal the beginning of a much larger and more destructive force. The story ends here.